All right, welcome back to our next unit dealing with urbanization in America. As we dealt with in level one, we began to look at how immigration was affecting these new cities we briefly mentioned. And all of this is a result of industrialization. And again, keep that in mind as we work through this unit of immigration, migration, and urbanization. Everything comes back. These were all effects of the initial cause, which was industrialization. So some of this will be building on what we have already learned. So you'll have to kind of dig back, and I'll try to help you review as we move through. So we're going to begin on slide number 15 here with level 2. And it will continue to build on our knowledge that we've already built in level 1. So got a few blanks that I need you to fill in. So as I go through these with you, fill them in so that you'll have them later on for easy reference. Check out the next note on number 16. So we know that immigrants are flooding into our country, and we talked about how they are beginning to build these little neighborhoods within cities, and that's all great. But they are coming in massive groves, and we see that over 10 million come in 1870, all the way to 30 million in 1900. That's a drastic increase in that 30-year period. You see, immigrants are going to remain in cities where they're going to work long hours for little pay. Still, a lot of immigrants are going to feel that their standard of living has improved drastically from where they are from. You see, coming to the United States is a major upgrade for them, even though they are still getting paid less and working long hours. As we mentioned, industrialization meant that farmers were coming to the city. So now we have a lot of farmers from these rural areas coming to the urban cities on top of the immigrants. And these farmers are going to begin to come here simply for better paying jobs. We have other amenities in the city that are very important, like electricity, running water, plumbing, and entertainment. This is important to note because entertainment, as we'll learn about later on in level 3 and beyond, that this is the first time that Americans have extra money. They're making more money finally so they can do some fun things, and we will see the rise of people like going to the movies, Broadway shows, and also going to sporting events as baseball catches popularity in America. And on top of that, as the population of these cities continues to increase, we have an increased need for housing and transportation. New urban environment. Cities are expanding so rapidly. So anytime that you have a high need of something that has a low supply, the price always increases. And that is what's going on with land in the cities. Building owners began to build up, and we see the rise of skyscrapers that were constructed for this reason. You see, it was cheaper to build up than to expand and buy more land. So that is why we continue to see the buildings get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it changes our urban landscape forever with skyscrapers. Also, with the rise in population and growth of these cities, on top of a need for living areas is a need for transportation. You have to ask yourself, how do you move so many people around cities much quicker? And that is very simply as you come up with new ways to do it and do it very efficiently. We'll start off with horse cars, but later move to very sophisticated electric trolleys like you see in San Francisco, or elevated railroads like we see in the city of Chicago, also known as the L trains. Engineers will also create ways to move around the ever-expanding populations in the city by going underground with the subway system in big cities like New York, and also the MARTA system in Atlanta. As you can note here, and on your notes, you will not see this green highlighted area, so please go ahead and type that on your note. But as we talked about with other ethnic neighborhoods forming and separating these neighborhoods, definite boundaries are going to be seen between wealthy and middle class and working class people living in these American cities. There was a class system, and if you were wealthy, you lived in the middle heart of the city with a big, beautiful home, and that dignified your wealth. Middle class people will begin to move outside of the cities, while working class people will begin to live in kind of these tenements housings, what we will call them, where it's not so great, but they are staying in the city. Class separation for the middle class is very distinct because we have a large movement of the middle class workers in these cities in the early 1900s moving to what we call suburbs. So cities like a major city for us would be Dayton. So you have people moving outside to like Vandalia and Centerville and places like that. Other cities, big cities here near us in Cincinnati, we have places like Westchester, Liberty Township, where these cities were industrial. So people wanted to get out of the cities a little bit to get away from the crowds and all that, but still be close enough to go into the city where they worked. And a majority of urban dwellers, so this is the working class, middle class is going to the suburbs, working class is staying in the city, and they're going to live in what are called tenements, which are very crowded family apartments. So this would be like your mom and dad, your brothers and your sisters, your aunts, uncles, grandparents, all living together in one crowded place because it's all you could afford. As with anything, anytime you have more of something, it can create more problems. And that is certainly the case with population and the growth of cities. With the growing population, it's going to result in an increase in crime, fire, disease, and pollution. The reason that fire is such a problem, as we see in the Great Chicago Fire, is that when one building catches on fire, because of the close proximity of the others, another one would catch, and then so on and so forth, and you get a domino effect. We'll have a rise in disease because of lack of sanitation and also pollution as the factories are continuing to pollute, and an epic increase in the crime and murder rate take place in these large urban cities in a 20-year period. And native-born Americans, those first-generation Americans we talked about, they are going to blame many immigrants for all of these problems. The problems won't stop there, though, with the ones we just mentioned. Alcohol is going to begin to contribute to the crime in the late 1800s. However, we have a lot of people consuming alcohol from Europe, and this is different. And as very simply, when people become drunk, they are impaired and they are not thinking clear all the time. So some people are beginning to make bad decisions, and we see an increase in crime. And these are Europeans who were used to consuming more alcohol. This was not a common thing here in America. We'll also see a big problem with contaminated drinking water from improper sewage disposal. There's not a way to properly dispose of waste, and that is getting into the water system and causing people to get very sick. Many people getting sick and even dying from typhoid fever and cholera. I want to keep in mind, too, we do not have antibiotics and readily available healthcare at this time either. So even though these are still very deadly diseases, there was still at this point not a lot of treatment for them. So as we move into the next unit, what I want you to keep in mind is still remembering that industrialization caused all of these problems with immigration, increasing the population, people moving to the suburbs, and we have these new problems in cities through urbanization, where we have an increase in crime, pollution, contamination. What that's going to lead to in our next unit is politicians are going to get involved, and we'll see politicians begin to control these cities, and we'll also see a need for social reform to address some of these major problems caused by industrialization in these cities with overcrowding and certainly sanitation. We'll see you next time for Level 3 on immigration, migration, and urbanization here in Mr. Jackson's American History class.